The blue and red lights shattered the night behind him, flickering across the wet asphalt like an omen. Malik Henderson's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He had signaled. He had stayed in his lane. He had done everything right. The patrol car loomed closer. Siren silent now, predatory. Malik eased onto the shoulder, heart pounding in a slow, heavy rhythm that felt too familiar. The wipers dragged across the windshield, smearing the rain into ghostly streaks. The officer approached with that careful swagger, a man certain of power. Tall, pale face, the brim of his hat dripping. License and registration. Malik's voice stayed even. Of course, officer. May I? Hands where I can see them. The tone cut through the rain like a blade. Malik froze, every nerve remembering a dozen headlines. He moved slowly, deliberately, his breath loud in his own ears. The officer glanced into the back seat, eyes narrowing at the stack of hardcover books. The silent wait. His own face printed on the dust jacket. The officer's mouth curled. You some kind of activist? Malik swallowed. I'm a writer, a beat of silence. Then the line that cut deeper than any slur. Never heard of you. Guess you're nobody. The flashlight beam burned across Malik's face, searching for defiance. Rain tapped the roof like distant applause. Malik's pulse was a drum. The officer's hand hovered near his holster. A distant thunder rolled across the highway, or maybe it was the sound of Malik's own restraint. Cracking. Then came the second voice, sharp through the radio. Unit 12, be advised. Drivers flagged for national recognition. The officer's face drained. The rain fell harder. Malik didn't move. Everything froze at the edge of revelation. Rain pooled in the cracks of the asphalt, glinting beneath the faint orange hum of the highway lamps. Malik Henderson's sedan sliced through the mist, jazz murmuring low from the radio, a tether to calm after 3 hours of back-to-back interviews. His publisher had called the night a triumph, yet he only felt tired. Then came the flashing lights. He pulled over without hesitation, window halfway down, wallet ready. Years of quiet rehearsal lived in that muscle memory. Every movement calculated, visible, non-threatening. The officer's boots thudded toward the car. Malik caught the glint of the badge before he saw the face. Evening, sir, he began, but the reply came clipped. License and registration. Malik handed them over. Did I do something wrong, officer? Rourke leaned closer, breath fogging the glass. Failure to signal lane change. You in a hurry? No, sir. Just heading home. Rourke's flashlight swept the interior. Laptop bag, water bottle, books. The beam paused on the silent wait. You a preacher or something? I'm a writer. Rourke's lips twitched. Huh, never heard of you. Malik smiled faintly. That's all right. Not everyone reads my genre. The tone pricked Rourke's ego. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, may I ask why? Step out. Now. Malik obeyed, slow, palms open. Rain slicked his jacket. The body cam blinked red, its lens unblinking. You recording this? Rourke asked, noticing the phone angled on the dashboard. Yes, sir. For safety. Rourke's nostrils flared. Safety? You expecting trouble? Just transparency. The silence thickened. Cars whooshed by, distant and indifferent. Rourke circled him like prey. Where you coming from? A literary event, D.C. Uh-huh. Lotta attitude for a writer. Malik exhaled slowly. I don't mean disrespect. Rourke's jaw clenched. Put your hands on the hood. For what reason? You questioning a lawful order? Malik's voice trembled, not with fear but restraint. Officer, I know my rights. Then you know resisting gets you in cuffs. A flick of the wrist and cold metal bit his skin. The cuffs clicked too tight. Rourke searched the car. The trunk popped open, papers fluttering like wounded birds. Malik's books spilled across the wet ground. Guess this is what passes for literature these days, Rourke muttered, boot nudging a soaked copy. Malik said nothing. Silence was armor. Then came the second patrol car, lights slicing through rain. One officer whispered, low but audible, You realize who that is? Rourke frowned. Who? Malik Henderson, the author. His face is all over the news this week. Rourke's expression cracked. A flicker of doubt, then shame disguised as anger. Malik met his eyes. Calm, unblinking. You're making a mistake, he said softly. Rourke's hand twitched on the taser. We'll see about that. The camera's red light burned. Somewhere beyond the storm, truth waited. The video spread faster than wildfire. By sunrise, Malik Henderson's arrest was trending on every social media platform, the clip looping over and over. 48 seconds of humiliation, authority unchecked. Notifications pinged relentlessly. His phone vibrated in his pocket like a heartbeat he could not control. The comments were a war zone. Some defended him, praising his composure. Others attacked with venom, mocking his age, his appearance, his career. Headlines screamed, "Writer arrested, misconduct or misunderstood." Every news anchor parsed the footage frame by frame, questioning Malik's demeanor as if calmness were guilt. He sat at the kitchen table, rain still drumming against the windows, his mug of untouched coffee growing cold. His publisher's voice echoed from the speakerphone. "Malik, the office says, and we need you to—" "Maybe stay quiet for now. Let the lawyers handle it." Malik hung up. Silence. He had been quiet too long, had been expected to absorb indignities, to rationalize them. The footage showed Rourke's sneer, the badge glinting, his finger pointing like a gavel. It was not just an officer. It was a system. Each time he replayed it, Malik felt the invisible chains tighten. Threatening messages poured in overnight. Anonymous accounts traced him, called him names, warned him to watch his back. Some messages were earnest, offering help, support, connections to journalists. The digital world mirrored the streets, polarized, raw, relentless. Malik opened a blank document. He began cataloging everything. The stop, the officer's words, the way the handcuffs bit into his wrists, the feel of wet leather against his skin. He typed each recollection with surgical precision. No embellishment, only fact. Memory became evidence. Words became weapons. By afternoon, his attorney called. "Malik, there's already interest from major networks. They want your side live, but we need a strategy. You don't want to play into their frame." Malik exhaled slowly. The storm outside mirrored the one inside him. This was larger than personal injury. This was a reflection of the invisible, persistent injustice he had felt all his life. He remembered Rourke's words, that sharp, cutting dismissal. "Never heard of you. Guess you're nobody." Malik stared at his reflection in the darkened window, eyes hardened, muscles tensing. He would not let Rourke define him. Not now, not ever. By evening, local news anchors replayed the arrest footage alongside clips of Malik at conferences, signing books, speaking to crowds. The narrative was being written in real time, one of outrage, disbelief, and mounting tension. Malik recognized the stakes immediately. This was not just about a traffic stop. It was a test of public accountability, a mirror of systemic bias, a reckoning waiting to unfold. His phone buzzed again, this time a text from a stranger. "If you want to make a real difference, document everything. We'll help." Malik typed back, "I already am." Outside, the rain finally let up, leaving the street glistening like polished glass. In the reflections, Malik saw himself, smaller, yes, but unbroken. For the first time that night, he felt the weight of potential, the power of witness, and the inevitability of exposure. The viral clip had ignited a fire, and Malik Henderson was ready to feed it. Rourke's office smelled of stale coffee and desperation. The fluorescent lights hummed, weak and unforgiving. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples, the patrol report still open on his desk. Typed lines glared at him. Driver resisted arrest, non-compliant, suspicious behavior. He knew they were lies. Every word was a construction, a shield against accountability. His partner, Officer Lyle, lounged in the corner, arms crossed, watching him wrestle with his conscience. "You okay, man?" "You've been off since this morning." Rourke snapped the folder shut. "I'm fine, just tired." Lyle tilted his head. "Come on, Dan, don't act like that's going to work." Everyone saw the footage. "You're walking a tightrope." Rourke's jaw tightened. "They don't know what really happened. That's all that matters. This is about control, Lyle, not them, not Malik Henderson. Control." Lyle's silence spoke volumes. He knew, they all knew. The internal emails already circulated. Directives to avoid media, phrases to use if questioned. Resisting arrest and failure to comply were rehearsed like lines in a play. Meanwhile, outside, Malik's life was becoming increasingly complicated. Unmarked cars lurked near his apartment. Mail arrived late or was missing entirely. Phone calls went unanswered. The first hints of intimidation were subtle, almost legal in appearance, but unmistakable in effect. Malik documented each incident. A nondescript van parked across the street, a stranger loitering near the bookstore where he volunteered, an email with a threatening subject line. The catalog grew into a pattern, a chain connecting isolated acts into something larger, more sinister. Rourke sat in his office that evening, replaying the arrest in his mind. His words echoed, "Never heard of you. Guess you're nobody." He had believed them in some small, comfortable way, but now the world had seen, and in that exposure, his authority began to erode. Internal affairs memos arrived in rapid succession, each one more insistent than the last. Ensure all documentation aligns with departmental standards. Flag potential media fallout. Prepare for community backlash. Rourke read each line as a warning, though the tone remained bureaucratically neutral. Neutrality did not soothe the gnawing anxiety inside him. Malik, aware of the stakes, refused to yield. His attorney advised caution, but he insisted on gathering more evidence. Each new incident of surveillance, each whisper from bystanders, became a data point in a broader story. He began planning a public statement that would not only defend himself, but expose the system enabling Rourke's behavior. That night, Malik reviewed the body cam footage again. The light reflected in his eyes a mirror of calculated resolve. He noticed small details missed by casual viewers. Rourke's hesitation, the micro-expressions of doubt, the subtle gestures of power. Each nuance was a fragment of truth, invisible in isolation but damning in the aggregate. Back at the precinct, Rourke's phone buzzed with texts from his superior. Press release drafted. Maintain storyline. He stared at it, mind flickering between fear and self-justification. Every instinct told him to suppress, to cover, to rewrite. But the cracks were appearing. Even Lyle's cautious glances betrayed unease. Malik's strategy was evolving. He would not fight only Rourke. He would illuminate the system, reveal the machinery behind the badge. He knew the public would react. They always did when someone bore witness. The question was whether the force trained to resist scrutiny would bend or break. By dawn, the tension had thickened. Malik's apartment remained silent, the city asleep around him. Yet he was awake, compiling notes, rehearsing his words, envisioning the confrontation to come. The surveillance, the department's spin, the subtle threats, all were now material for a story, one that could not be ignored. Rourke, in contrast, could not sleep. Images of Malik's composed, unflinching face haunted him. Every lie he drafted, every narrative he rehearsed felt brittle under the weight of truth. He understood finally that authority alone could not erase the spectacle of injustice. The first cracks of exposure had begun. One officer's conscience, one viral clip, one meticulous writer. The pressure was mounting. Neither man could predict the consequences, but both knew equilibrium was gone. The die had been cast. Malik closed his notebook. The storm was no longer outside. It was inside, and it was coming for them all. The studio lights were harsh, sterile. Malik Henderson sat in the interview chair, posture straight, hands folded, a practiced calm masking the fire beneath. The host, a woman with sharp eyeliner and sharper questions, leaned forward, her voice polished but probing. "Mr. Henderson, some viewers feel your demeanor during the arrest was confrontational. Do you believe your attitude contributed to the incident?" Malik's eyes narrowed, but his voice was steady. "I was calm. I complied. I did what anyone should when confronted with authority. The problem isn't my attitude. It's the system that assumes guilt based on the color of my skin." The host nodded pensively. "So you're saying this is systemic?" "Yes," Malik replied, "and visible in every interaction where power and prejudice intersect." The cameras rolled, capturing every word, every measured breath. He spoke of the traffic stop, the fabricated charges, the intimidation afterward, the unspoken threat in every glance from the officers, the silences, the microaggressions that built into violence. A graphic flashed behind him on the studio monitor. Viral arrest footage, the nation responds. Clips looped, showing the patrol car lights, the cuffs clicking, Rourke's smirk. Millions had seen it. Millions would understand. Malik continued, describing the private threats and surveillance, the subtle manipulations designed to silence him. "I am a writer," he said. "I tell stories. But this isn't fiction. This is the story of everyday America. The system that marginalizes, the machinery that protects those in power, the fear that keeps people quiet. I am one of the lucky ones, visible. But how many are not? The host leaned back, scribbling notes. Many viewers are asking what can be done. Malik's answer was simple, precise. We bear witness. We document. We demand accountability. Silence is complicity. That is the only solution that matters. Rourke watched the interview from a small screen in his office, fingers tight around a coffee cup he no longer drank. His face paled as Malik's words struck like a hammer. Every viewer, every mention of systemic abuse, chipped away at the authority he had long believed unassailable. The narrative was shifting. Malik was no longer just a victim. He was a catalyst. Public pressure mounted, trending hashtags forming like a chain across social media. Malik Henderson. Justice. Stop the abuse. Protest organizers shared the clips, educators discussed the implications, and ordinary citizens debated the language Malik had used. Careful, exacting, undeniable. Meanwhile, inside the department, internal memos flew. Superiors instructed officers to avoid any public comment, to stick to neutral phrases to avoid escalation. Rourke felt trapped. His previous confidence, the arrogance of power, evaporated. For the first time, he considered the possibility that the truth could topple him. Malik, sensing the impact, began drafting a new piece for publication, an essay titled, "The Weight of Being Seen." He poured every detail of the stop into his prose, the flash of the flashlight on his face, the sting of the cuffs, the sneer of the officer. Each sentence bore the precision of someone who knew observation alone could dismantle the walls of silence and fear. By nightfall, his words were ready. Early morning social feeds would carry them, viral before most had their first coffee. Malik knew the strategy. Truth amplified was more powerful than anger, more damaging than confrontation. He wielded language as a weapon, turning narrative against injustice. Rourke's phone buzzed with updates from internal affairs. The clips were being shared, discussed, dissected. Each post, each comment, each retweet was a strike against him. His colleagues whispered in hallways, uncertain, defensive, afraid. His partner Lyle avoided his gaze. For Malik, it was not triumph, but leverage. Visibility was power. Words were shields and swords. Every carefully constructed sentence widened the gap between perception and reality, exposing cracks in a system built on silence and compliance. He leaned back in the studio chair, exhausted, yet unyielding. Across the nation, people watched, listened, reacted. Rourke, meanwhile, stared at his own reflection in the dark office screen, realizing belatedly that one viral moment could rewrite a career, and perhaps the conscience of an entire institution. Malik's voice, calm but unwavering, ended the segment. They assumed I was nobody. But in truth, the system's failures are the real story. The feed cut, but the echo lingered. The public conversation had shifted. Rourke understood in that instant that authority without accountability was brittle. The weapon of words had pierced the armor of his power. Malik Henderson had made his stand. Rourke's home smelled of burnt coffee and stale air. He had poured one cup, forgotten it, poured another. The house was quiet except for the occasional click of the thermostat and the distant hum of traffic. His wife, Karen, sat at the kitchen table, glancing at her husband with suspicion. "Dan," she said finally, voice soft but edged. "You've been off since this morning. What's going on?" He avoided her eyes. "Nothing. Just work. Don't lie to me," she snapped. "I saw the video. That man, you humiliated him." Rourke's hand trembled slightly around the mug. "I followed procedure." He resisted. Karen's laugh was hollow. "Procedure? Dan, procedure doesn't humiliate someone on camera. You've embarrassed yourself. And the family." His teenage son Tyler appeared at the doorway. "Dad, is that really you in the video?" Treating him like that? His voice was accusatory, small but cutting. Tyler held up his phone, replaying the clip silently. Rourke's chest tightened. Authority, the thing he had built his life around, was crumbling at home first. His son's disappointment, his wife's anger, the public scrutiny, all collided into a knot of shame he had never felt. Back at the precinct, superiors demanded damage control. The department was scrambling, issuing statements, reinforcing narratives. Resisting arrest, non-compliant driver, routine stop. The words felt empty to Rourke now. Hollow armor against an audience that had already judged. He drank heavily that night, replaying every detail in his mind. Each step of the arrest, every inflection in Malik's voice, every steady gaze, it haunted him. The phrase he had used, "never heard of you," "guess you're nobody," looped endlessly. He had meant it as dismissal, but it had aged into reckoning. Meanwhile, Malik's essay, "The Weight of Being Seen," began circulating. Excerpts appeared online, puncturing the department's carefully curated narrative. People reacted, outraged, reflective, mobilized. Malik's words reframed the arrest from an isolated incident into a systemic problem, highlighting the routine erasure of Black lives and voices. The media began connecting dots. Previous complaints against Rourke, internal memos dismissing community concerns, subtle patterns of bias. The department, once confident, now feared exposure. Rourke's colleagues whispered, hesitant, defensive, aware of how quickly one viral video could unravel careers. Rourke tried to sleep but failed. Images of Malik, calm yet firm, replayed in his mind. The applause of the public, the spread of the essay, the meticulous documentation, all reminders of his own failure. Every justification he had relied upon felt flimsy, eroded by the truth of visibility. At work, Rourke found no solace. Lyle avoided him. Other officers eyed him with caution. Meetings became interrogations. Each memo, each phone call from superiors was a reminder that authority was conditional, dependent not on right but on perception. Malik, on the other hand, strategized. He arranged interviews, coordinated with journalists, prepared a narrative that could not be ignored. He knew the stakes. Exposing one officer was not enough. He had to reveal the system itself. Every tweet, every news appearance, every essay became part of a network of pressure, systematically dismantling the facade of control. Rourke's private life deteriorated further. Karen refused to attend family gatherings. Tyler stopped speaking, his disappointment a constant ache. Social media reminded Rourke of his public image daily. Memes, commentary, critiques, all circling his name like vultures. His career, once secure, now teetered precariously. By the end of the week, Rourke understood something fundamental. Power without accountability is fragile. Authority enforced by fear and silence can collapse under scrutiny. Malik's calm persistence had become a weapon sharper than any badge or gun. Malik, exhausted but resolute, continued documenting each encounter, each threat, each bureaucratic maneuver. He knew the fight was larger than him, but he had chosen not to hide. He had chosen to be seen, and in that choice he realized the first cracks in the badge had begun, cracks that would widen, exposing the rot beneath. Rourke stared at the ceiling that night, unable to sleep. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. Every step he had taken to assert authority now seemed insignificant. He understood that his words, his actions, and his ego had consequences beyond the precinct walls, consequences he could not control. And somewhere across the city, Malik Henderson typed the final line of a new draft. Calm, precise, ready to strike again with words. Malik, on the other hand, strategized. He arranged interviews, coordinated with journalists, prepared a narrative that could not be ignored. He knew the stakes. Exposing one officer was not enough. He had to reveal the system itself. Every tweet, every news appearance, every essay became part of a network of pressure, systematically dismantling the facade of control. Rourke's private life deteriorated further. Karen refused to attend family gatherings. Tyler stopped speaking, his disappointment a constant ache. Social media reminded Rourke of his public image daily. Memes, commentary, critiques, all circling his name like vultures. His career, once secure, now teetered precariously. By the end of the week, Rourke understood something fundamental. Power without accountability is fragile. Authority enforced by fear and silence can collapse under scrutiny. Malik's calm persistence had become a weapon sharper than any badge or gun. Malik, exhausted but resolute, continued documenting each encounter, each threat, each bureaucratic maneuver. He knew the fight was larger than him, but he had chosen not to hide. He had chosen to be seen, and in that choice he realized the first cracks in the badge had begun, cracks that would widen, exposing the rot beneath. Rourke stared at the ceiling that night, unable to sleep. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. Every step he had taken to assert authority now seemed insignificant. He understood that his words, his actions, and his ego had consequences beyond the precinct walls, consequences he could not control. And somewhere across the city, Malik Henderson typed the final line of a new draft, calm, precise, ready to strike again with words. The investigative piece hit the internet at dawn. Headlines blared. Internal police documents reveal pattern of misconduct. Malik Henderson arrest case under scrutiny. Screens everywhere lit up with the story. The journalist had published internal memos, emails, and corroborated witness accounts. The evidence was irrefutable. Rourke sat at his kitchen table, the newspaper open in front of him, hands trembling. The words blurred as reality sank in. Every fabrication, every misstep, every act of intimidation was now documented for the world to see. His badge, once a symbol of control, felt heavy with exposure. Internal Affairs called immediately. The department suspended Rourke pending a full investigation. Colleagues who had whispered behind his back now avoided him openly. Lyle's hesitant glances turned into deliberate avoidance. Authority, he realized, was conditional and fragile. Malik watched the publication online, exhaustion etched into his features. This was not triumph, not vindication. It was accountability. Yet the emotional toll was immense. Sleepless nights, constant scrutiny, and the knowledge that nothing could erase the memory of humiliation, of being rendered nobody on a public stage. Across social media, the public responded in waves. Commentary, analysis, and calls for justice surged. Protests intensified but remained peaceful, fueled by evidence and clarity. Malik's essay, now linked to the exposé, became a touchstone for discussions on systemic bias. His words, coupled with the documented evidence, transformed outrage into actionable scrutiny. Rourke's phone buzzed repeatedly. Calls from superiors, news agencies, and even local government demanded answers. Each notification, each question felt like a nail in the coffin of his career. His carefully maintained facade of competence and authority disintegrated rapidly. Malik, conversely, faced the cost differently. Death threats and harassment had escalated, his privacy invaded. But with every threat, he had a response: documentation, evidence, and public testimony. He had converted intimidation into proof, ensuring that attempts to silence him only strengthened his case. By midday, multiple news outlets had picked up the story. Interviews with former officers, experts on racial profiling, and community leaders painted a full picture. Malik's calm, deliberate testimony contrasted starkly with Rourke's defensive, cornered position. Public opinion began shifting decisively, framing the narrative as one of systemic failure rather than isolated incident. Rourke's home life collapsed alongside his career. His wife confronted him, furious and disappointed. His son, once awestruck by authority, now viewed him with disbelief. Friends and colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the fallout. Authority without accountability had proven brittle. Malik, though weary, recognized that this was only the beginning. Exposure was not a shield from trauma, but it was a tool for justice. He had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into a national conversation about power, bias, and visibility. The viral arrest had catalyzed a reckoning, and his careful documentation ensured that the truth could not be rewritten. By nightfall, Malik closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. The storm outside mirrored the internal turbulence, relentless, chaotic, but necessary. The exposure was complete. The consequences immediate and tangible. The work of accountability had begun, and somewhere in isolation and shame, Rourke confronted the truth he had long refused to see, that systems, like people, can no longer hide behind authority alone. The auditorium was packed, the scent of polished wood and fresh paper mingling in the air. Malik Henderson stood behind the podium, his notes arranged neatly before him, though he rarely needed them. The microphone carried his voice effortlessly to the farthest rows. Every eye was fixed on him, readers, students, journalists, strangers united by the story they had witnessed. He opened with a passage from his latest book. The stop, his voice was steady, deliberate. Each word measured, the hum of fluorescent lights, the tap of a pen in the back row, the subtle rustle of pages being turned. The scene unfolded in real time for the audience. The rain, The patrol car lights, the feeling of being seen and dismissed, the cuffs pressing into wrists, the flash of a badge, the whispered threats, and the viral exposure that followed. Malik's narration flowed seamlessly into reflection. He spoke not just of the incident but of its broader implications. Systemic bias, power unchallenged, silence as complicity. The audience absorbed every word, some nodding, others with tears glimmering in their eyes. In the middle of the room, unnoticed, Rourke sat slouched in a rear row. Demoted, anonymous, stripped of authority, a shadow of the man who had once called Malik nobody. His eyes, weary and unguarded, followed Malik's movements. Unable to escape the reckoning, Malik paused, letting the room settle. Then he read the final piercing line. They called me nobody, but we all know who the nobodies really are. The applause was immediate, not for revenge, but for recognition. Malik's words had transformed humiliation into a shared understanding of injustice. The collective acknowledgement of truth was more powerful than any legal victory, more enduring than any reprimand. Rourke's presence went largely unnoticed, a silent witness to the consequences of his actions. He felt no malice, no direct confrontation, only the weight of exposure and the realization that his behavior, once hidden behind a badge, was fully visible. The consequences were social, personal, and undeniable. Outside the auditorium, news crews captured the aftermath. Students and attendees shared their own experiences of bias, some stepping forward for the first time. Malik listened, offering brief words of encouragement, witnessing the ripple effect of his visibility. His fight had sparked discourse, reflection, and the beginning of systemic scrutiny. Backstage, Malik allowed himself a quiet moment. Exhaustion pressed in, but so did a sense of resolve. The fight was not over, but the story had shifted, from isolation to community, from humiliation to voice, from invisibility to undeniable presence. Rourke exited silently, avoiding cameras and questions. The world would now hold him accountable in ways that he could neither evade nor deny. Public scrutiny, once abstract, had become personal, intimate, and inescapable. Authority without accountability had crumbled. Malik stepped back onto the stage for a brief Q&A. The questions were probing, intelligent, compassionate. Each answer reinforced his message. Visibility matters, documentation matters, and speaking truth to power changes systems. The night ended with no grandiose victory, no simplistic revenge. There was only acknowledgement, understanding, and the slow, deliberate work of reshaping perception. Malik Henderson had transformed a moment of personal injustice into a broader societal reckoning, using words as his instrument and witness as his shield. And as the lights dimmed, the audience filed out, their conversations echoing in the vast hall. Outside, Rourke disappeared into the shadows, stripped of authority but marked by consequences. Malik, meanwhile, remained visible, a testament to resilience, justice, and the enduring power of truth.